Hello. You mute. Carol.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Carol. How are you? What's new? Hey, ma'am. Hey. You having a good brunch over there?
Lunch, yes.
Lunch. I get up late, so it's always brunch for me. I've become such a night owl. It's kind of crazy. Did you guys go away this summer? Are you going away?
We are. We're going to Vermont for a month, mid-July to mid-August for
Okay. I
our
know you
music.
usually go. I mean, I know it's like I always think like Berkshires or something, but
Yeah. We're actually renting a house for a month. This is the first time we've
oh,
gone.
nice. We're in Vermont.
Well, we're renting it in Wilmington, but we go to the Marlborough Music Festival, which
Oh,
is in
okay.
Marlborough, Vermont.
And where? I'm sorry.
It's in Marlborough,
Right.
Vermont, which
That's
is in
southern.
very southern Vermont.
Okay. My brother lives in central Vermont, so my Vermont references tend to be. I know everything from where he lives. He teaches in Middlebury. They live in Bristol, and I know everything up there going to Burlington. But besides that,
This is
I
the
don't know what.
real southern Vermont, almost on the Massachusetts border.
Gotcha. Very nice. Hello. Hello. No. Okay, he's muted. But hello, other. I don't know this person's name. But hello. Do you know him?
I know because he comes to a lot of these Rachel
Okay.
sessions. I'm going to put us on mute because we're having lunch.
Sure. Hello. Hey, Audrey.
Hi, Debbie. Good to see you. Hi, everybody. Lunch looks good, Carolyn, ma'am.
Okay, they're on mute because they're eating. Oh, I like Mickey Mouse over here. That's a very adorable picture.
Thanks, Deborah. I'm sorry. It took me a while to unmute. Let me start the video. Okay.
Good to see you, BJ. I'm glad you could join us.
Better? Not much. Here.
Oh, Barton. Yes, Rachel. Hello.
Hi there.
Hey.
Good to see you all. Thank you, Debbie, for helping us hold on to the right link and reminding us of our timing. I Hope everyone's well today. So the gong of 12 o'clock has arrived.
Yes.
Join me to pause for just a bracha of appreciation for these texts, for this community, for the ongoing tradition of studying together and engaging with Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Parashat Baha'alotcha is where we are this week, and I usually like to tune into this class a few minutes earlier just to get my bearings, but I was actually searching on the internet for an image that I could share. I wanted to see if I could share an image of Moses that's not at the burning bush, not at Sinai, not baby in a basket, but later on. And to my, well, I don't know, just curiosity, artists don't seem to be interested in the part of the story that we're going to look at today, which I think is a shame. So I'm saying this out loud because if there are any artists out there, we need your input here. We're about to look at a most fascinating part of the Moses epic, as it were, which comes up this week in Parashat Baha'alotcha. So just to kind of situate us, we came into the book of Numbers, I guess 2 weeks ago or so, and what changes this week all of a sudden is that the story picks up again. The narrative of the people relating to Moses to them, and of course the character of God in all of it as they try to find their way forward in their journey. So if we looked at the early part of Baha'alotcha, we would see that it focuses more on priestly duties of lighting the lamp in the sacred space for the community. And it's only later in the parasha that the kind of, I don't know how to say, the more interesting or the more complex story of human relationships and godly relationships picks up again. We haven't heard much of this for many weeks because most of Leviticus doesn't touch any of this, and even the latter part of Exodus. So it's as if a story sort of has been on pause for many weeks, and we're about to pick it up again today. I'd like to look with you at a passage from the latter part of the parasha, from chapter 11 of Numbers, and with a specific eye towards Moses's evolution, or really struggle to evolve as a leader. I guess I wanted to also just add, just for context, the part we're going to look at comes right after, obviously if it's chapter 11, it comes after chapter 10. I knew you all would know that. And just to note, chapter 10 is where we get that passage from the Torah service. Well, it's from chapter 10, and we put it in the Torah service. Vayehi bin soa ha'aron, vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, etc. Some of you are shaking your heads if you know what I'm talking about. It's for us. It's the part where we open the ark doors. I've shared from the Bima a few times how much I've struggled with that particular passage. It goes back to this part of the Torah where it was apparently used by the children of Israel, by Moses, to summon the protection of God as they made their way forward in their journey and faced a whole succession of enemies. That's why I feel uncomfortable about it. When we start the Torah service, I don't want to start with thinking about who our enemies are. I'd rather think about our commitment to the principles of Torah. But this is how our tradition has evolved, and this is what we've been given, so it's ours to struggle with. So the part we're now going to look at is right after this. Moses has laid out this process where when the children of Israel are in motion, he will summon the presence of God to go with them. And when the ark rests, when they rest from their travels, the presence of God should also rest with them. And now the real story of human interaction and godly intervention picks up. Okay, so here's the source sheet. Wait a second. Not that, but this. Screen share. Okay. So our title this week is Who's in Charge Here? As we're going to see Moses continue in his struggle with what it means to be in this this position of leadership that he has been thrust into. And actually, let's just pause for a minute and remind ourselves of the initial call to leadership, in which he was a very reluctant participant, right? At the burning bush, he's the one that says to God, are you sure you want me? Because I'm not really the right guy for this. You're familiar with this famous language. I'm ani arel sfatayim. I'm uncircumcised lips. I don't really speak well. All that. And then by the end of Exodus, remarkably, I always find it remarkable, by the end of Exodus, he's saying, he's so invested in the whole, process and relationship and so on, that he's saying to God, not only am I totally in on this, but I want to see you face to face. That moment in the latter part of the book of Exodus, and of course, again, famously, God says, you can't see my face, but I can show you my back, and that's about as close as you'll ever be able to see. Now we're in a very different snapshot of Moses' journey. He is no longer the reluctant leader, but perhaps the fatigued leader, the overwhelmed leader. So I actually put in the source sheet the whole chapter of chapter 11. It's too much for us to read aloud, but just to kind of let your eyes glance over this, we're opening with this moment where the people, not for the first time, are complaining with such bitterness. They don't have the things they want to eat. They feel like, again, look at verse 5. Zacharanu et hadaga asher nochal b'Mitzrayim. We remember, we had fresh fish in Egypt. Now all we have is this manna, and we're kind of bored of it. And even though it's supposed to be magically able to change into whatever we want, we miss the good old days, so to speak. And the Torah even, lays out these delicious food items. Fresh cucumbers, melons, and leeks, onions and garlic, all these delicious things. Now there's nothing at all but manna. And the people are really kind of fed up. And so Moses also is overwhelmed by their complaining. And I bolded the part that I wanted to, there's sort of two sections in chapter 11 that I want to especially look at with you. So first this section, beginning with verse 11. And I'd like to read through it in the Hebrew, and then, look through it with you. Okay, so beginning with verse 11. Vayomer Moshe el Adonai, Moses says to God, Lama hareota le'avdecha. Why have you hareota? Look at this word. It has the word ra inside it. It's the verb of, why have you eviled me, sort of. Or why have you made this bad situation? Lama lo matzati chen beinecha. Why haven't I merited to look well in your eyes? So parenthetically, that you would treat me well, Moses is saying to God. Lasum et masa kol ha'am hazeh alai. Why have you put this whole burden on me? This whole nation, there's you got them just resting on me. You really feel the fatigue in Moses and the sense of, I just can't do this anymore. Okay, going on to verse 12. He'anochi hariti et kol ha'am hazeh. Sorry, my little, there. Im anochi, and here's the part that I want us to take notice of. Yelidtihu ki tomar elai sa'ehu b'chekecha. So he's saying, he's saying to God, it's as if you think I gave birth to them, that you would say to me, take them to your breast and nurse them. Ka'asher yisa ha'omen et hayonek, like and he's almost inventing some new language here. Omenet is a wet nurse, but Moses is a male, so he turns it into ha'omen et hayonek, the one who would take the baby to its breast. Al ha'adama asher nishba la'avotav. To the land that you have promised, you've swore to them, that was for their ancestors. Moses continues, Me'ayin li basar letet lechol ha'am hazeh. Where am I supposed to get meat to feed all these people? Because that's really what they want. They've had it with the manna. Ki yivku alai. They're crying to me. Like again, like a parent saying, "Ay, these children will not stop kvetching. They're crying to me, upon me, really." Lemor tzna lanu basar v'nochela. Saying, "Give us some meat so we can eat." Finally, he says, these last two lines here, "Lo uchal anochi levadi." I am not able on my own. Laset et kol ha'am hazeh ki kaved mimeni. This is just too much for me. I can't take it anymore. And look where he goes. Im kacha at aseli hargeni na. Just kill me now. Hargeni na. Harog im matzati chen beinecha va'al er'eh bera'ati. If you're going to treat me this way, I'd rather just die. That's how wiped out I am and fed up I am, and I just am not the guy for this job. So wow, quite a contrast with where we've seen Moses in other moments of his relationship. And we know, because we've read the other parts of the Torah, that there are other moments of this level of frustration. This is a little bit of a prelude to what's going to come up later, where he strikes the rock in his frustration. So it's if you've been around young children and they kind of challenge you once, challenge you again, finally you just lose your temper, or at least I certainly have. That's where we see him going. Okay. So there's a second section of this chapter that I'd like to look at with you, but I'm going to put that off for now and come back to that. First, to look at some commentary on this piece about Moses saying, look, I'm not a mom. I'm not even, I don't even have the right equipment to do this, which he's saying to God, you seem to want me to do. Okay, so let's look first at Or HaChaim. I have several sort of short commentaries. I'm going to skip over what he has to say about Shmuel and Amalek. Here. We may understand the words Uveine Moshe Ra as referring to God's anger. It displeased Moses that God had become so angry at the children of Israel in his account. According to Sifri, one of the other commentaries, God gave Moses a preview of the punishment he was going to exact from Israel on account of this misdemeanor. So sorry, I realize I jumped ahead here without explaining. What comes after the part we just read? Here? Here. Sorry, folks. Yeah. You all know this story. What comes after this part is God saying, oh, don't worry. They're going to have plenty of meat to eat. They're going to have so much meat to eat. It's going to be coming out of their nostrils. They're going to be like, just you wait, Moses. Okay, so that's what the Or HaChaim is referring to when he says he's giving Moses a prelude, like a preview of, sorry, go back to this now, the punishment that's yet to come. Hang on, I'm not trying to make you nauseous. There. Moses reacted by asking God if he really considered it fair to feed the children of Israel meat only to let them die as a result of their eating meat. So in this commentary, the Or HaChaim is saying, Moses was feeling ambivalent, like he felt overwhelmed by all the kvetching and carrying on, and at the same time, he never lets go of his role as advocate for the people before God. So he's just, and that's of course part of what makes him the heroic leader, as Erica Brown says, the heroic leader that he is in his relationship, mediating between the children of Israel and God. While he's so frustrated, he's also saying to God, but you're not going to hit them too hard, are you? Like they're just they just are bored and hungry and tired. Okay. I want to pause for a moment in looking at this. Last Shabbat was we had that opportunity to honor Sheila Feldman, and we are so grateful to both Audrey and to Jeff Weintraub, who has engaged our elders in conversation as they're being honored. And watching Jeff and Sheila in conversation reminded me of the many times that I would go to Sheila kind of in the posture of Moses as a parent myself, because one of Sheila's many gifts was as a parent educator, really expert with a lot of wonderful insights. And I would go to her and say, okay, now what do I do? The older one wants to do this, or the other one wants that, and I just can't, whatever the issue would be. And at one of those times, Sheila said to me, all conflict is internal. Like if you're busy railing against someone, you really need to look inside and see what's stirring up inside you. And I'm mentioning this because there's a little bit of that going on with Moses here. He cries out to God and says, I can't do this anymore. And yet at the same time, as you just saw in the Orach Chaim commentary, he's also saying to God, but, don't punish them too much. They're just people and they don't need to be strangled by this meat. Okay, so just recognizing the humanity in Moses. One of the things that we're going to look at in a few minutes is a wonderful excerpt from this book. Can you all see that? This book by Aviva Zornberg, which is a biography of Moses, which she calls Moses a human life. And one of the things we keep learning about him is it was his humanity that made him such a hero, his struggle with all the things we struggle with. Okay, so let's go back now to our comments. Okay, going on. Now a couple of shorter ones. Just remember going back to this marvelous language that Moses lifts up to God in his frustration, again saying, am I really going to be like a wet nurse here? Ki tomar elai sa'ehu b'chekecha ka'asher yisa ha'omen et hayonek. Are you, God, really going to say to me, like, do you think I actually gave birth to them? I didn't. Am I supposed to carry them, like in a baby pack, the way a parent carries a baby and nurse them whenever they're hungry? Like, come on, God, what's going on here? Okay, so now Ibn Ezra says, he's just commenting on this, hariti, which is like, am I the one who gave birth to them? Ani imam, am I their mother? And just below that, this Yelidatihu. Can everybody see this? Yelidatihu is the quote from the Torah. And you can see the word Yeled right here. See that? Am I their father? Am I the one that begat them and brought them into the world? And obviously it's a rhetorical question. Moses is saying, no, they're your children, not mine. You deal with them. Okay, one more short one from Da'at Zekenim. Again, playing with this language. Ki tomar elai sa'ehu b'chekecha. Are you, God, saying to me that I'm supposed to carry them close to me, like you would hold a baby? Moses implies that had he not been commanded to carry on this position, he would by now have quit. That's how exasperated he is. That's how fed up he is. He needs a day at the spa, clearly. Okay, one more short one. Now this is Siftei Chachamim. Again, playing with this, to carry them like I would carry a child. And Siftei Chachamim is in turn quoting Rashi here, who's answering this question with the following. The verse implies as a nurse carries an infant to the land, but does a nurse carry an infant to the land that you swore, God? He answers that to the land refers to carry it in your lap. So even though what we're really talking about is the larger journey of the children of Israel making it into the land, in this moment, this utter parental comfort is what's being requested from the people. Okay, and now going back to Orach Chaim, the first darshan that we looked at just a few minutes ago, he's now commenting on the latter part of the section we looked at from the Torah. Lo uchal anochi levadi laset. I cannot carry this burden all by myself. So in this moment, he says, Orach Chaim says, Moses is showing truly what he feels in this moment. He told God that his refusal to carry the load all by himself was not due to a lack of goodwill to carry out God's assignment, but to his conviction that it was beyond his ability to do so. So think of the times that you've been at a task, even one that you felt really devoted to, and you found it hard to carry out, and you start to feel really discouraged. I mean, you start to feel like, God, maybe I just am not the person for this. I don't have what it takes. And you sort of start to give up from lack of confidence. So maybe it's not even that the other players in the interaction are so unreasonable or demanding, but just that you don't have what it takes. And so again, remarkable. This is the Moses who took the children out of Egypt and who brought them to Sinai and who showed up and dealt with the golden calf and has done all these incredible things. He is still doubting his capacity to carry out the task at hand. It's really, frankly, rather comforting if we're considering kind of the human journey that he's been on. And, I've said to various times in the past, I always thought, well, by the time you get to middle age, you'll have it all figured out and you'll be confident and you'll know what to do in each moment. And then I got to middle age and found out that that was not true either. That there are yet more moments of feeling like, I don't know if I have the stuff for this. So thank you, Moses, for showing us that even the big people have those moments and doubt themselves and yet carry on, which I think is another one of the ways that we recognize the heroism that's here. He doesn't put aside the task, even though in this moment it sure looks like he would like to. I want to keep going. I think there's one more thing on here before we pause for some input. Yeah. We'll get to. Okay. Okay. So finally, the Tur HaAruch, who's also commenting on this. Lo uchal levadi. I can't do this by myself. And now I'm just going to skip down to this part that I bolded here. What Moses had hoped to accomplish by having the elders appointed, because that's going to come up here too. Part of God's answer to Moses is, okay, you don't have to do this by yourself. Remember, Yitro, we have like a whole team here. We've got 70 elders we're going to put in with you. What Moses had hoped to accomplish by having the elders appointed was that if the people had a number of leaders, by the time the complaints would be transmitted to him, if they proved beyond the competence of the elders to deal with, at least the people's anger and fury would have been partially spent. So that it wouldn't be coming at him like a hose on full force. At least the presence of the mid-management level could help to deflate or diffuse some of the frustration that was coming to him as the chief of the HR frustration department. Okay, and finally here, just look at this with me. This is from Aviva Zornberg, from her book on Moses. And she's really looking again into this interesting analogy that Moses uses about being a mother. A short time before this, she says, Moses had cried out to God about the paradox of his own identity. Did I conceive this people? Did I give birth to it? That you should say to me, carry it in your bosom as the wet nurse carries the suckling child to the land you swore to its fathers. She says, using imaging that expresses an inexpressible frustration, He imagines himself as a mother to his people, to his brothers. And she says there is a violence in his cry. How can he carry this people in his bosom as though he had been impregnated with them, had given birth to them, had become their male wet nurse? The demand made on him by God is ultimately a demand that he speak to them. And he is as unequipped for that role as a man is unequipped to conceive, to give birth, and to suckle. Okay, so just hear what she's saying here. The demand made on Moses by God is ultimately a demand that Moses should speak to them. Moses should say, look, this is what you have to eat. But he feels, I can't speak to them because speaking to them is like requiring me to be something that I'm not. To speak to them, he imagines, would mean to hold them, like I think she means here to hold, like we would hold a baby. To be entirely present to their needs, to be penetrated by them, even like Miriam, to give birth to them. It's a level of intimacy and complete surrender that he's clearly really struggling with. Unlike a mother or a wife, he is not flesh of their flesh. And yet his imagination dwells on feminine images of nurturance, of deepest connection, of trustworthiness in relation to the people. To be an omain, and I underlined it here, it's not omen like in English, omain. In Hebrew, normally the word would be omenet, a wet nurse. A male wet nurse in this case would be to display in his relation to them the same unchanging stability, the same availability as God celebrates in the related term, ne'eman. So lovely, love, and Shlomo, you and I have talked about this several times. Just it's so delightful and delicious to find ways that the words that you wouldn't necessarily think of as connected together share pieces of roots. A wet nurse, a nursing caregiver is also one who has that kind of steadfast faithfulness. The demand is that he be constantly attuned to the wavelengths of his people as he is to those of his God. So boy, there he is feeling just pulled in two different directions. He's got to listen closely to what God wants and also be totally tuned in, completely of service to the people. The dveikut here meaning clinging to or cleaving to, the passionate intimacy of motherhood, ideally, without ebbs and flows, is imaginatively present to him. Womb and breasts are implicitly grafted on, as the man Moses imagines the totally unacceptable. In some way, God seems to demand a feminization of his masculine self. And I think Aviva Zornberg is saying that's another thing that he's struggling with here. He's again saying, I wasn't built for this. I'm not even the right gender for this kind of caregiving. So I want to pause here. I had planned to do a sort of a second section of this chapter 11 with you, but let's just pause here and absorb some of the comments that have been given by the Meforshim, by the well-known commentators, by this Aviva Zornberg, and see what thoughts are coming up for you or questions may be coming up for you. Shlomo, go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, I think that God hears Moshe and understands that he needs more strength, and he can no longer lead the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that Moshe is punished for striking that rock.
Mm-hmm. Later on.
Because before he strikes the rock, he sends the scouts to Canaan. 10 of them come back and say, we can't go in there.
Mm-hmm.
Kalev ben Yefuna and Yehoshua say, we can go in. And then Moshe falls on his face, and he doesn't know how to deal with these 10 scouts who come back and say, we can't go in. And he doesn't know what to do. And then at that point, God tells him, you're not going into Canaan.
Right.
It's not after he hits the rock that he learns that he's not going into Canaan. He learns about that before he hits that rock, at least in the sequence that it's delivered in the Torah. Now, we can say, Ein mukdam ve'ein mu'achar.
There's no before and after.
Yeah, we can say that. But in the sequence that it's written, he learns that he's not going into Canaan when the 10 tribes come, when the 10 scouts come back. And that's before he hits the rock.
But Shlomo, are you saying that the way you read that is?
But I'm not finished. So at that point, God understands. He's done it. He's done what he's going to do. And it's time for new leadership. And he tells Moshe at that point, when the tribes come, I keep calling them tribes, when the scouts come back, and Moshe falls on his face and doesn't know what to do about it, because in Devarim, when this business is repeated, I think, and I'm not really sure about this, got to check it out. God says to Moshe in Devarim, in the repeating of this story, Rav lach, you've had enough. And in that retelling, it suggests that God recognizes Moshe has done what he can do. He's been a great leader up to this point, but and now it's time for Yehoshua to take over and let Moshe know that Yehoshua is going to take over.
But I'm just curious, how do you relate that back to what we're looking at today?
Well, I'm looking at Moshe saying, I can't do it anymore. Kill me if you want me to continue this. And I'm saying God is hearing that. And he says to him shortly after this, okay, Rav lach, you've had enough.
So you're not reading it as a punishment for Moses, but just as
I don't see it as a punishment.
Recognition. You did. Thank you for your service. You've done a great job.
And in addition, that hitting of the rock takes place in, I think it's Rephidim, but I'm not sure. But it's the second telling of a story of where the children of Israel come to a place and Moshe interacts with a rock and they get water. And so I'm looking at it, well, maybe there were two original stories of this business that the redactors put together. They couldn't decide which story to put in the Torah. So as they frequently do, they put both in.
Right. Okay. All right. You're giving us a good, appetizer for what's coming later in the book of Numbers. So thank you. Where did you go? There you are. Okay. Thank you. Bob, go ahead.
This is kind of a recurrent tactic of Moshe. Starting with the burning bush. It seems like he's always testing God. He's always saying, I can't do this, because he's trying to see if God will step up and help him. And there's this kind of back and forth between Moses and God about who's going to do what. Are you really on my back? Are you just sending me out to fail? Are you going to be? And God is always comes up and says, okay, I'll bring in Aaron, right? When he's going to do and he's always doing, Moses is always testing, saying, I can't do it. God comes back. And I think this is another episode of that, where he's saying, the people, I can't do this, the people. And the guy said, well, okay, all right, I'll give you meat. So there's this continuing, it's part of the beauty of this relationship between Moses and God, I think, is that Moses is always testing God. God is always testing Moses, seeing what are the limits.
Yes, I wanted to put the Torah text back up, because Bob, you were saying, let's just look at this for a minute. I hadn't planned necessarily to go so into this, but I think Bob is pointing us here. So starting at verse 16. Asfali shiv'im ish. Gather up 70 men, 70 ish, miziknei Yisrael, from the elders of Israel, asher yadata kihem ziknei ha'am, the ones who have experience as elders and can be in these leadership roles, and I'll create some leadership support for you. That's what he says. That's the first thing he says. Then after that is God saying, oh, you want meat to eat? I'll bring you meat. But so before the kind of godly response to the people of, I'm going to give you more meat than you ever dreamt you could have, God does, as I think, Bob, is what you're saying, come up with this sort of a practical solution. Okay, let me remind you, you don't have to be alone in this. And, let's look around and see that there are at least 70 trustworthy, experienced people that are going to help you govern here. So it seems like a very practical solution. I don't know, Bob, is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the back and forth that always intrigues me. That
Mhm.
Moses is testing God, God is testing Moses. Moses becomes so emboldened at the end of Exodus, he kind of turns his back on the Pharaoh and walks out on him.
Mhm.
And that's partly because he feels God is behind him, with him.
Right.
And so he's always testing. And so that I think that's what keeps Moses going. Always, he wants to see his face. And God says, well, you can't see my face, but you can see my back. I mean, there's this constant relationship.
Hang on, I've got Audrey, Marilyn, and Barb coming up. Hold on just a sec. When you said he's going, just a minute ago, Bob, you said something like he's going constantly going back and forth, Moses. And Shlomo was quoting before from Devarim about some of the language between God and Moses. There's that other passage at the end of Devarim when Moses is about, so he's handing over the mantle of leadership. He's soon going to die, and he says, "Lo uchal latzet v'lavo." I can't go back and forth anymore. I can't do that back and forth thing. I'm just wiped out. So anyway, thank you. Okay, Audrey, Marilyn, Barb. We'll just go in that order.
So it's funny that the three women now want to speak as mothers.
Yes. No, I was hoping that might. Yeah.
Because it kind of reminds me of when, like, I'm on a car trip with the kids when the kids were young, and they're crying for food, they're hungry, and they're not quite sure where they're going, and the griping and the complaining gets worse. And I think this is a clear example of where Moses needed to do a better job. And the elders, everybody, explaining the journey and what we're doing short term and what we're doing long term. And that Erica Brown refers to like the destination postcard. He needed to paint a better picture of what the plan was, what the food was like, where we're going, how we're going, which then will calm people down. So it's not so much the relationship between Moses and God, which is really important, but he also has to have the children of Israel begin to take on responsibility and grow up. And the more information they know and the more knowledgeable they are of the journey ahead, I think that would probably calm them down and they would have stopped complaining as much.
So wisdom from, years of motherhood coming in here to say,
At realistic expectations.
Well, this is where we're going. Like the McDonald's is up ahead. Just wait 10 minutes.
Right.
Something like that. And just
Right.
take responsibility for yourself at this point to know where this is the plan, this is where we're going. And I don't think Moses really lays that out. Maybe because he's not sure either.
He himself
That's the
doesn't have
problem.
experience,
He
right.
doesn't know well enough. That I hope, we have to hold God responsible for that.
Yeah.
And the elders maybe don't know that either. So that plan at this point in time might not work that well. So that's
it
as
doesn't.
a mother, that's what I have. One of my
So look at this. The women are lining up here. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Madame. Marilyn, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute.
My comments are rarely on the biblical scholarship end of things. However, I feel like in this discussion, it goes back to Moses having the speech defect and not being able to speak up for himself, and how that probably had a huge impact on his psyche. And then also relating that to kind of the commentary from Aviva Zornberg, was that her name? That you were reading, that somehow a man who has a disability feels less than a man. And I was thinking about Franklin Roosevelt. I mean, I was thinking about the responsibility that Moses had and how the responsibility seems to be put on people in history who are seemingly not up to the task because of a disability. I was just thinking of Franklin Roosevelt sitting in his wheelchair running World War II, even though we know that we have our huge problems with Franklin Roosevelt's behavior. Anyway, that was my thought.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if men have a greater sense of inadequacy because of their disabilities than women do. I'm not sure. But an interesting question. Yeah, Barb, go ahead.
So Moses is in the wilderness along with the children of Israel. But he's not just literally in the wilderness. He is in a mentoring wilderness. The history is that the Israelites were enslaved for hundreds of years, and the only model of leadership was Pharaoh, which was awful. So unlike rabbis or any of us who've been in the work world, who've had mentors from whom we've learned and seen what to do or what not to do, Moses never had that. And he, like Jacob, is really wrestling with how to proceed. And this is the second time that he's been told, go get some help, because his father-in-law back in Exodus said, go get 70 elders and get them to help you and go get and delegate.
Right.
And he's really having a hard time with that because he doesn't have a model from which to draw.
Right. He got called up into leadership with no mentoring, no training, no supervision other than God. Yeah. And you're right. And you could say Yitro, his father-in-law, somehow kind of was a guiding hand as well. Although it's interesting that what happened to all those people from Exodus? Where did they all go? Moses sort of lost touch of them, lost track of them. So here he is struggling again.
Isn't Yitro mentioned in this parasha? He's called Chovav.
Yes, Yitro's. No, I'm saying what happened from Parashat Yitro when Yitro says to him, "You don't have to do. You are going to burn out if you keep trying to do this by yourself." Yeah. Carol Kranowitz, you were going to say something.
You said something real.
Yes, I was going to say something, but is it Marilyn who was talking about the speech impediment?
Yes, I think
yes,
so.
Yes, that was my comment too. That I remembered that. And where's Aaron? And how having that would deter Moses from feeling he could address his whining children.
Yeah, you're saying it would deter him because he was a poor speech.
Yeah.
Yeah, and both you and Marilyn. I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second, please. Sorry. Okay. Both you and Marilyn pointing to that made me think again of the Aviva Zornberg commentary that we looked at, and actually took the two of you to help me understand what Aviva Zornberg was trying to say, where she says, the task Moses has is to speak. He has to speak to the people. That's his tool for leadership, speaking to them. And that's where he feels like he can't quite do it. He's not an effective, through his words, use your words, so to speak. He's not able to do what or at least he feels he's not able to do what he needs to do. It feels like such a, sorry, pardon the pun. It feels like such a drain on him.
And one more comment. We all know when we feel inadequate in one way, a little paranoia sets in, and we begin to think of all the other ways we're inadequate.
Yes. Yep.
So not only is he not a facile speaker, but he doesn't have breasts and milk and the other physical attributes that apparently a good leader would have.
You just made me remember whatever times that the kids were, as infants, just so, like beyond, I couldn't do anything for them. Finally, just feed them.
Yeah.
Put something in their mouth and they'll stop fetching. So yeah, my words certainly weren't working, and my other tools weren't working. So okay, here's something to.
And he
Yeah,
can't even do that. Yeah.
right. Okay, last thing on this, and then we'll move on to the other part. Shlomo, go ahead.
I don't think we can talk about Moshe as having a speech impediment. You read the book of Devarim, which are full of the most magnificent speeches that anybody has ever delivered on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you have to look at Aral Svatayim. What does uncircumcised lips mean? Can you circumcise lips or uncircumcise them?
Right.
So, I mean, we have
But it's all in the self-perception. Whether or not he was a brilliant speaker is besides the point. He didn't perceive himself to be an effective speaker. And
unless he was using that to get out of the job.
okay. But even if he is doing that, it's somehow, at least this set of commentaries is saying must have been somehow because he felt inadequate. I just want to get Debbie in here because I see she's.
The reason I'm just going to be really quick, but I just went to a conference where the person who was the president of this organization, his outgoing president, gave the keynote address, is a severe stutterer. And he talked a bit about, and he's a full professor at the University of Vermont, and he talked a bit about pursuing this career, as an economist, with this stuttering and the thing is, yes, he's capable of delivering and did deliver a fantastic speech, a very compelling speech.
Yeah.
Really wonderfully crafted. And he still stuttered many times through it, even though when he's not stuttering, he's an incredibly effective speaker. It's an impediment.
Yeah.
But what he had to do, not just the force of will, but just sort of like forcing himself outside his comfort zone to pursue this and keep on going and practicing. I guess I just think that what Shlomo said, I don't think the two things are incompatible. I just think it requires a certain personality and
to be able to say, yeah, I've just got to do this, even though I have this.
And that is not an easy task at all. And especially if you're feeling that you will not be, this person that I know well, David, he's operating in a pretty accepting environment where people are going to tolerate it. When people are going to denigrate you because of this impediment, how much harder is it to actually assert yourself? Yeah. So I would just question that presumption.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Okay, we have just a few more minutes, but I wanted to try to just catch one other small part of this parasha, of this chapter. So let me just go back to the screen share for a moment. Okay, so we're now back in chapter 11, and the 70 elders have gathered, and sorry, I really wanted to try to kind of do the Reader's Digest version here. He gathered 70 of the people's elders and stationed them around the tent. Then after coming down in a cloud and speaking to him, as God likes to do, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh drew upon the spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 participating elders. So God is now saying, I'm going to take some of your leadership, power here, Moshe, and spread it around a little bit, take some of the pressure off of you. And when the spirit rested upon them, they spoke in ecstasy. What is that a translation of? Here. Vayit nab'u. This is where we get the word navi from. They prophesized. They translate that into they spoke in ecstasy, but in the Hebrew it's vayehi kanoach alehem haruach vayit nab'u, and so there was the Spirit of God resting upon them, and they spoke as prophets. And then we have the introduction of this pair. Two of the participants, one named Eldad and the other named Medad, had remained in the camp, yet the Spirit rested upon them. They were among those recorded, but they had not gone out to the tent. And they also spoke in ecstasy in the camp. So they're prophesying in the camp. Let's just be clear here. They had not been in the enclosed tent area. They were sort of in the community. Okay, now verse 27, you can see 27 through 29 are bolded. Just try to do this quickly. Vayarotz hana'ar vayaged leMoshe vayomer Eldad uMedad mitnabeim b'machane. A young assistant, a na'ar, it says, a youth, came and ran and said, Moses, there are two renegade elders here. You need to do something. Vaya'an Yehoshua bin Nun misharet Moshe. So and Joshua sort of gets riled up about this apparently, and misharet Moshe mi bachurav vayomer Adoni Moshe kilaem. Please, Moses, do something about this. Kilaem, hold them back. This shouldn't be happening. And what does Moses say? Vayomer lo Moshe, hamikane ata li. Are you jealous on my account? Umi ten kol am Adonai nevi'im, ki ten Adonai et rucho alehem. I wish everybody had the Spirit of God on them so that everybody could, okay, and then we go on from there. But it's just wanted to look at this, so interesting. So others perceive that Moses' leadership and his authority is being challenged. His perception, his response is, no, it's fine. Let more people in here to take some of the load and to spread the burden around. Maybe there'll be some better answers. That's sort of how I imagine Moses. Okay, I have too many pieces of commentary for us to absorb all today. Let me just do this part briefly. Rashi looks at this root, kuf nun aleph, using it to imply that a person sets his heart on the matter, whether it be to take vengeance or to help. Whenever we see that kaneh, I'll pronounce it that way. Okay, let me keep going. This is Chizkuni now commenting on Moses saying, I wish it would let everybody have the Spirit of God resting on them. He wanted them to receive the Holy Spirit from God directly, not only as a part of the Holy Spirit that had been bestowed upon him. He realized that the 70 men had received only part of the Holy Spirit that he had been endowed with, and that this Holy Spirit would vanish as soon as he would die. There is some midrashic commentary that says, it doesn't tell us this in the Torah, but that Eldad and Medad were prophesying that Moses was going to die. And that's part of why it's so remarkable in the eyes of the commentators that Moses he wasn't upset about this. Or either he hadn't heard what they were saying, only that they were prophesying, or he had heard it and he said, okay, whatever it is, let the leadership be spread around a little bit. So he prayed, according to Chizkuni, that they would also have a more stable sense of God's presence in their prophesying. Okay, I'm going to skip down to the last thing that I have for us, which is from a modern day commentator. He comes from a much more traditional perspective than most of us would be in our community, but I really enjoy his commentaries. He says, he notes that if you look at Sanhedrin 17a in the Talmud, there are a number of different versions of what Eldad and Medad were actually saying. Rashi instead chooses to cite the tradition from Sifrei, and this is what I was just trying to explain, that they prophesied that Moses was going to die in the desert, and that Joshua was going to lead the children of Israel into the promised land, which of course, according to the Torah and the Tanakh, is what happened. This tradition, which sheds light both on Joshua and Moses' reactions, highlights Joshua's humility and extraordinary love for his mentor, and Moses' lack of concern for his own fate. So here's where we come back to perhaps Moses' heroic qualities, his true leadership qualities, which are such that while he may be overwhelmed with frustration in a given moment, in a given day, at the end of the story, he surrenders his whole journey so that the rest of the people can go forward, even as he struggles with that. Indeed, Trugerman says, as the Torah reports, Moses' instinctive reaction was selfless. Would that all the people were close enough to God to merit his spirit resting upon them. And the implication is, even if what they have to say isn't in my favor, even if what they are prophesying isn't going to be, to support me as a leader or to celebrate me as a leader, I think Moses is saying, I think it's a better setup if we allow the leadership to be spread around, if we allow the Spirit of God to be felt by many people who may be open to hearing it. Go ahead, Audrey.
Just real quickly, we're going to be reading the part about Korach soon. So here's someone who steps up and tries to be the leader, and look what happens there. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, but actually in this, and I want to get to Kevin. I think Kevin or Marcia, you have something to say. Kevin, Shlomo was, I think, mentioning this before when Korach and his minions come to challenge Moshe, he falls on his face. I think, Shlomo, you were mentioning that earlier, that him falling down.
When the scouts come back and give the bad report, he falls on his face. He might also do that at Korach also.
I think he does it also with Korach. I always interpret that falling on his face not to be any kind of leadership impotence, but rather to be a sign of humility. Like, okay, if this is the way it's supposed to go, I accept that. So, I'm sorry, Audrey. I don't know if I'm taking you off course.
No, it's just that Korach ends up and his people being killed because of his assertion of his authority.
Yes.
So while Moses may be humble, Korach is not the leader. He's taking on almost too much responsibility and challenging, and he's punished for it.
He is most certainly punished for it.
Where Eldad and Medad are not, they're praised for it.
Right.
And Nadav and Avihu are also punished for it.
Nadav and Avihu, is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah, we're also punished for
taking matters into their own hands. Yeah. Right. Kevin, go ahead.
I think Moses was happy that he could see that it wasn't just the 70 elders, but now there were more Jews and it would not die with him. And I take the proof text from Lo Yosifu, the ones who were the 70 elders, and they did prophesy, then they couldn't continue. Now he could see that outside of the tent, prophecy would still continue. Jews would seek relationships with God. And that's what I think Moses wanted.
Kol hakavod, and what a beautiful place for us to land. That if the ultimate vision is that this thing should not die with me. Whatever our task is, that we're here to carry it forward, even to the point where we step out of the picture and someone else takes over. And I wish all of us the courage to be able to be in that posture with whatever journey we're on in our lives, and to take some inspiration from this story that in the day-to-day, we're probably going to struggle with that. We're probably going to get really annoyed and frustrated and even feel like we want to give up. And at the end of the day, we hopefully won't, if we're like Moses. And there will be another chapter. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Really appreciate the chance to get to know these texts with you. And please keep well. And thank you, Debbie Trope, our head of Jewish Studies. Luther, I think, will be back with us next week.
Right. He's in France right now.
He's in France right now. Some poor thing.
Yeah, I know, right?
Okay, see you all soon. Keep well,
Thank you again.
everyone.
This is fantastic. Bye-bye now.